Hello, this is Rachida again for another video. Today we're doing artisanal bread, which is called also levain bread, sourdough bread, and sometimes just le pain de la campagne, la boule en français. So this bread has only 3 ingredients: water, salt, and flour. And you're wondering, where is the yeast? Well, the yeast, the one I'm using, is the starter, and the starter is made from water and flour, and that's it. This is the part 1 of the artisanal bread, and the first thing we need to do is feeding the starter. My starter sits in the refrigerator for days, for months, and for years, and I use it only once or twice a month because I make a lot of bread and then I just slice it and freeze it. So I take the starter from the refrigerator, which is basically 200 grams. I feed it and it becomes 400 grams. I split it, half of it goes back to the refrigerator as a starter. The other half I feed it for the second time and I use it in the bread. So we're going to show you how it's done. We're taking 200 grams of the rice starter. We're adding 100 grams spring water. We don't want to use regular water because of the chlorine, and we don't want that to interfere with our natural bacteria. We stir it very well, and we're going to add 100 grams of rye flour. I'm using rye flour because that's what I'm using in my bread when I'm using this starter. You can use any flour you want. We're taking 200 grams of the rice starter. We're adding 100 grams spring water. We don't want to use regular water because of the chlorine, and we don't want that to interfere with our natural bacteria. We stir it very well, and we're going to add 100 grams of rye flour. I'm using rye flour because that's what I'm using in my bread when I'm using this starter. You can use any flour you want. And we keep stirring it to make sure no dry flour is left. Then we pour it in a clean jar. You don't need to do it that way. I'm doing it just for the sake of this video, so you can see the progress of the starter in a clean jar. We're going to leave this starter at room temperature between 10 to 14 hours, and the size normally doubled, sometimes even triple. That's why you need the jar 3 times the volume of the initial volume of the starter. So now we're going to stir this starter and remove half of it, meaning take 200 grams of this starter, put it in a jar, and store it in the refrigerator to use it for another project. Now we have 200 grams of starter. We add in 100 grams of spring water, then 100 grams of your preferred flour. I am adding rye flour because that's what I'm going to use from my own bread. And we stir them again, the same thing, and we're going to leave them at the room temperature for 10 to 14 hours. Make sure the jar is 3 times the size of the initial starter, because you may have the starter tripling and you may have a little problem. So here we just clean up the jar. We're making the dough even so we can see the progress of the starter, and that's it. This is part 2, where we're going to stretch the dough, fold the dough for like 20 to 40 seconds, and let the dough rest for a few minutes, 20 minutes to 40 minutes. And we do that 5 times. So basically, our working time is going to be 3 minutes, but the resting time, it can be to 4 to 5 hours. So let me show you how it's done. After weighing all the flours using a digital scale and also weighing the water and weighing the salt also, We mix the dark flour. I'm using here spelt flour. You can use any other dark flour with all-purpose white flour. I'm mixing both of them using a whisk, and then I'm going to put a little bit of water on the salt. I'm using sea salt. You can use kosher salt, of course. And the next step is mixing the starter with the water, and then mixing everything in a KitchenAid bowl. This bread has 70% of hydration. That means for every 100 gram of flour, we have 70 gram of water. So we're mixing everything in this bowl. Then we're going to add the flour, and we're going to mix all of it using my KitchenAid mixer, using a flat beater for just 30 to 40 seconds. We're just mixing all these ingredients until we don't see any dry ingredients. We don't want to knead this dough. You can do the same thing using your own hand. After mixing all of these ingredients, we're going to stretch the side of the bowl using a dough scraper, and we're just going to fold the dough over itself. We don't want to knead it. Then we're going to cover it with a kitchen towel and let it rest at room temperature between 20 to 40 minutes. After half an hour, the dough is completely rested. We add the salt, and we're going to stretch it, pulling the dough from the side, and we fold it over itself. And we do that again between 20 to 40 seconds, because we really want to be gentle with the dough. Like we said, there is no need in here. We're just folding the dough. And I am going to change to a larger bowl, and it's a glass bowl, just for the sake of the video, so you can see what's going on. Then after that, I'm going to cover the bowl with a lid. I have a fitted lid, and we're going to let it rest between, again, 20 minutes to 40 minutes. And you can see the volume of the dough starts increasing. The dough is more flexible. Since the dough can be sometimes sticky, I always keep a small bowl with water where I dip my hand, and I keep stretching and folding, no more than 40 seconds. And this phase is called bulk fermentation. And I'm going to leave the dough at room temperature between, again, 20 minutes and 40 minutes. This is the second time I'm doing this. And I'm going to keep doing that again and again for 4 to 5 times. And the dough is going to be more flexible. It has a beautiful texture. It's silky, and it's easy to work with. After the last stretching and folding and resting, which is basically going to last for 4 to 5 hours, we put the dough on your kitchen counter. Mine, I put it on a silicone liner. You put a lot of flour on it generously, because the dough is very sticky. So at this moment, we're going to split the dough in 2 portions. I'm splitting mine in a small portion, a third, and the other one 2/3, because I'm going to bake one big loaf of bread and one small one. So you just try to make it like a ball. You shape it like a ball, and then you take a kitchen towel and flour it very well, because like I said, the dough is very sticky. Even if it doesn't look sticky, you make sure you put enough flour. And then we're going to place the dough in a deep bowl, and we want to make sure that the bowl has something where like a lid. Mine has a fitted lid, because we don't want the dough to dry out once we put it in the refrigerator. With the second portion of the dough, This time we're going to shape it into an oval shape, rectangle shape. So I'm going to use a rectangle loaf pan. Make sure you flour the dough generously, because it will stick if you don't. And we use a small kitchen towel. The smaller the better. Normally we use the kitchen towel so it doesn't stick to the pan. This pan does not have a lid, so we're going to use a plastic bag, just a regular plastic bag, so we can close it. And we don't want any air to get in the dough, because it will dry out once we put it in the refrigerator, and we're going to keep it there between 1 day to 5 days. Don't skip this step, because the cold fermentation will promote good flavor. This is the part 3 of the artisan bread. I'm going to show you how to bake the bread. Very simple. To create an old style brick oven, we use pots. I use these stone ceramic pots from Emile Henry, and I use also the cast iron pots. This one has an oval shape. And recently I start using La Cloche from Emile Henry, which is allow you to trap the steam in the dome, and that way you get a crunchy, chewy crust. We put the cold pot inside the cold oven. I'm using the oven gloves. You don't need to, I forgot. Then you turn the oven to 550 degrees for 45 minutes at least, to make sure that the oven is really hot. Take the dough from the refrigerator and put it on a kitchen working table once the oven is ready and hot. The volume of the dough is going to be increasing between 30 to 60% because we're using dark wheat like spelt wheat. We're going to flour the dough so it doesn't stick to the pan. At this moment we get the pan, it's really hot from the oven, and we place the dough in the middle. Using a baker blade, we're going to score or slash the dough to help the steam to get out from the dough, so it will and the dough will be expanding. Your loaf of bread will be expanding in size. And here I'm slashing the dough 4 times. Then we cover it with the lid as fast as we can, and we have to be careful, it's really hot. And we place the whole thing in the oven. Again, we want to close and open the oven quite fast, because we can easily lose 40 to 50 degrees. 45 minutes later, we get the pot from the oven. We have to be very careful, it's really hot. Now we're baking the second loaf of bread, which has an oval shape. We're going to flour the dough so it doesn't stick to the pan. Then we're going to flour the surface of the dough so it looks good, and then we're going to score the dough with a baker blade. We close the lid, we put the whole thing in the oven, which is already at 550 degrees. At this moment, we're going to lower the temperature of the oven to 475, which is also true for the first loaf of bread. I forgot to mention that. We're going to bake this loaf between 40 to 45 minutes until the loaf is dark brown. After 45 minutes to 1 hour, since this loaf of bread is quite big, it's almost 2.5 pound, you remove it from the oven and you put it in a cooling rack to cool between 1 hour to 3 hours, believe it or not, because the big loaf of bread is going to keep baking inside. It's normally the crust normally is hard, it's hollow. It's really dark, and the temperature inside of the loaf of bread is around 210-220. You don't need to measure the temperature, just to show you that it's too hot to cut this bread. After 1 or 3 hours, then we're going to check the temperature. Like I said, you don't need to, just to make sure it's under 120 degrees. Then we split the loaf of bread in half. Then after that we slice it. Now you're ready to eat this beautiful bread. Normally I do put those slices of bread in the freezer in a plastic bag for a few days, sometimes even for a few months. The texture, the taste, the smell is all wonderful. Your bread is going to taste better than the bread you buy from the store. I hope you find the time to master this artisanal bread making. And you can see the bread has big holes, and even though it's spelt or even wheat bread, it will come up like this. Very good.